Good morning, everyone in Europe. Good afternoon, everyone in Asia, and good night, everyone in the American countries. This is our first OHDSI virtual study-a-thon. I'm sure I don't need to tell you why we've gone virtual. It wasn't the plan to go virtual, and we've never done this before. But we're going to spend 4 days together in this new world of coronavirus pandemic. Can I have the next slide, please? This is what we're going to be covering during this kickoff presentation. I'm going to be walking you through the steps that we followed and how we ended up here. George Hripcsak from Columbia University will tell you all about OHDSI. Patrick Ryan from Columbia University and Janssen Analytics will tell you where we are going. And then Peter Rijnbeek from Erasmus Medical Center Rotterdam will tell you how we get there. And we'll have hopefully some time for Q&A, and we should finish before 1 hour from now. Next one. Just an admin note, which is, I guess, the equivalent to housekeeping rules in this new world again. We are going to be using this broadcasting kind of meetings to just present to you what we're doing. There's not much of a chance for interaction during the presentations in these sessions, but there is an opportunity to ask questions, and we will answer those questions at the end of the meeting. You will have a logo or an icon with a kind of little question mark where you can ask questions. If you post them, we will be able to moderate them, and at the end we will be taking those questions. An additional nice feature that this has is this option to have subtitles in multiple languages as we speak, and you can find that under the caption subtitles as it's shown here. There are many languages, and Korean is definitely one of them. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about how we got here. Next slide, please. So the original plan that we had been preparing for months was to have an OHDSI Europe meeting in my own town in Oxford in the United Kingdom. We were prepared to accommodate up to 350 people from all over the world, and we had more than 200 people registering at the time. We had to cancel the event. There was going to be a lot of science, a lot of learning, a lot of interaction, and we had a wonderful list of speakers who were going to take us through the journey that goes from data at source to reliable evidence and impact on clinical practice. There was also, next slide please, there was also some time for social events and having fun together, again in that world where we used to travel and go to places. Next slide. Instead, as you know, there is an ongoing crisis with a pandemic of coronavirus infections affecting pretty much the whole world nowadays. And we decided to contribute to flattening the curve, to slow down the disease, to slow down the pandemic, and to help our colleagues in the frontline healthcare systems around the world to cope with the situation. And we put safety first and decided to inform the face-to-face symposium. After pondering this for a bit, we decided that instead we should be organizing something to contribute to stop this pandemic, and that is what we're going to be doing together for the next 4 days. Next slide, please. So this is where we are now. The whole world is pretty much affected by this disease. There's outbreaks in all different countries in Europe, Asia, America, Oceania, Africa, just everywhere pretty much. And if you look at my community locally in the UK, you can see to the left how that curve is basically now taking off, and we are in an exponential growth in numbers of cases, as many other colleagues are doing. So my feelings and my strength to all those who are fighting this disease, and to those who are fighting the battle in the healthcare systems all across the globe. Next one, please. So how can we help? We've been discussing this with the organizing committee for a bit. One of the things that we are very worried about is the overloading of healthcare systems and the capacity issues that can arise from that. there is very little data on the characteristics of this disease, on the prognosis and on the treatments that are needed. I just got a bit of news from yesterday where you can see here a 36-year-old lady from London actually died after being told she didn't have any risk factors and being sent home. So, you know, we believe that characterization and something around the prediction of who is at risk of complications is of fundamental importance, and we believe that OHDSI can really help with that. Next slide, please. And of course, in the current, you know, rapid development of things, we're also seeing people contributing and writing and publishing clinical guidelines. You have here the first ones that I saw, which come from the CDC, Chinese CDCs, and then to the right bottom, the Royal College of Physicians, which are the guidelines that we are supposed to be following in the UK. Next slide, please. And of course, regulators are also doing their job and trying to approve medicines in a timely fashion. There's examples of, to the left, approvals of medicines like Actemra tocilizumab in China, or the approval of hydroxychloroquine in the US for the treatment of coronavirus without too much evidence. We go to the next slide, please. So again, we believe that we can contribute to these using our effect estimation and causal effect estimation methods from OHDSI and data from across the globe to look at what is the safety of those proposed treatments and what are the potential antiviral effects. You will see throughout these 4 days that we will be focusing a lot on previous systemic viral infections like the flu, and then we will be transporting those results and validating them in COVID infectees data or cohorts as soon as they appear. Next one. Thank you. I'll pass it on now to Professor George Hripcsak from Columbia University.
Hello and welcome. Yes, this is George Hripcsak, Columbia, and director of the Coordinating Center at Columbia. Next slide. I think it's a good time to step back and review our mission statement to improve health by empowering a community to collaboratively generate the evidence that promotes better health decisions and better care. So I think our mission statement that we came up with many years ago is extremely appropriate right now and is at the core of what we're trying to achieve with OHDSI. Next slide. So my main message is thank you to everyone who's joining. It's incredible that we came together, so many of us, so quickly, bringing in skills and data sources. So kind of on behalf of us, which is all of us, thank you to all of us. So I think we should appreciate how quickly this came together. And thank you to our hosts. Before I go off, Danny, Peter, Patrick, an amazing job putting this together. Next slide. To remind ourselves, we're a global community. Almost 3,000 people work hard on the forums and 25 work groups, 20,000 posts in a year with 150 databases from 18 countries and about 600 million unique records. Next slide. And that we're a diverse group. We come from academia, government, health systems, technology-focused, patient representatives, pharmaceutical, payer, etc., with skills in informatics, medicine, computer science, epidemiology, statistics, and so on. And it's this breadth that allows us to carry on a study-a-thon like this. Next. Over the years, we've seen an enormous growth in our data from, say, 2015, when we started at the very beginning of 2015 to now 2019. The number of databases and the number of records in our databases, and especially the records that are outside of the US, have grown enormously. Next slide. So OHDSI we work hard on our databases, we work hard on our methods, we work hard on building software, but our main mission is generating evidence. And I'm pleased to say that I created a slide with just some of our recent publications, not on the infrastructure, but on evidence, and assembled them. And now we're at the point where you have to pick which evidence we want to put to fit on a slide. I'm very proud of the work that we've done, and some of these papers are really changing medical practice and having an impact, and I hope we can have an impact in this very grave problem today. Next slide. We have data from all corners of the world, from Europe, UK, Netherlands, Germany, and missing friend, and in Spain. South Korea, a number of databases that I won't go through all the names, and our partnership with the Korean government, which will be like a critical part of this. The Japanese database, in the US, several databases from Columbia, and large-scale databases in Stanford and Tufts. There's a lot of databases that came in after this slide was made, so I can't name them all, but we look forward to being able to work with each of these and see what evidence we can generate. Let me hand it over to Patrick.
Thanks, George. So what I'd like to do is take a few minutes to talk about where we're going to be going for the next 4 days and what we're going to try to accomplish together. First, I'd just like to recognize the challenging situation that we're in and take a moment to reflect on all of the patients that are suffering from this disease, all of the healthcare professionals that are out there on the front lines trying to deal with this very difficult situation. I think it's times like this where we need to be able to rally together and work together to try to come up with a common solution. And I'm quite hopeful that what we're going to be doing over the next 4 days is an opportunity for us to make a meaningful contribution to public health. So as I start this, I also want to make a thank you. A lot of people have been working tirelessly for the last several weeks as we've been thinking about what we need to do as an OHDSI community. What we're kicking off today is a study-a-thon, and indeed it'll be a 4-day event where a lot of us are going to spend a lot of hours working hard. But it's really important to recognize that what we're doing here is not just some event. This is the kickoff of a sustained effort across our entire international community to do whatever we can to generate reliable evidence to support policymakers and healthcare professionals and patients with evidence to help understand this disease and understand what we can do to improve health decisions. But a lot of work has gone into preparing this, and so I want to recognize the core team who's been meeting multiple times every day for the last several weeks since we decided to do this. I want to highlight the review teams who actually got started well before the study-a-thon to conduct a series of literature reviews and prepare evidence so we could all get started. I want to provide a shout out to the vocabulary team who actually did some pretty remarkable work in preparing an improved vocabulary that actually is now completely up to date with all of the latest diagnoses and procedures associated with COVID-19. I'd like to give a shout out to our support team. So Craig Saxon's been doing amazing stuff on communications. Lee Evans has stood up an entire technical infrastructure with us with the help of Anthony Senna and James Wiggins and Henrik and Mace and others on the Erasmus team are creating this entire environment so that we can pull this off. We've got technology partners like EvidNet and AWS and Odysseus who've generously provided their services. We've got data partners like HERA and IQVIA and the NHS and CPRD who've really gone above and beyond trying to make it possible for us to answer the call for this public health problem. And as George said, I just want to thank you all. It's very inspiring to me to see when we said let's hold a study-a-thon and wonder if anybody will show up, to see that 350 of you have answered this call to action and have come together to work together towards this common problem. So I want to thank you for joining us in this journey. So if we're going to talk about a journey, I think it's helpful to go to our roots of what we've been talking about in abstract terms in OHDSI for quite some time. Our focus here is trying to use observational data and to generate real-world evidence from observations captured during the routine course of clinical practice. So a patient journey might look like this. You've got a person shown longitudinally on an x-axis of time. A person has data captured at moments in time, data such as conditions that they're diagnosed with, drugs that they are administered, procedures that have taken place, and measurements that they may be recorded. And every person, all of us, have some journey through the healthcare system, every encounter we've had with every provider or any part of the healthcare system, and all the data that's captured throughout the course of our lives. But if we can take an individual's patient journey, we can actually translate that into ways to ask questions. In this particular example, I'm highlighting the fact that if we just anchor our view of this patient's journey on a particular drug, well, then we could say, well, that must be a treatment for something. And on the basis of seeing that treatment, we could ask questions like looking prior to the treatment to say, I wonder why they're taking this treatment. Or we can look forward to see, I wonder what outcomes are going to be experienced by this patient. And all of our observational databases around the world are nothing more than a collection of patient journeys. And I think there's no time more salient than right now to recognize that when we talk about data and we talk about populations, we need to recognize that each and every patient is a person like you or me or a family member or a loved one or a friend. And what we're trying to do is learn from those patient experiences to help the next patient in making better health decisions. And so we're going to be trying to honor the past experience of patients' histories and patients' journeys that we've captured over the last decades of time, and also try to honor those patients who are currently inflicted with this disease that we can learn from to try to help patients that may experience this disease in the future. Now the question really becomes, what questions can we answer if we frame this way? And in general, we can say that there's lots of questions that one might have. We could ask questions like, well, which treatment does a patient choose after a diagnosis? Or which patients choose which treatments? Or how many patients experienced an outcome after a treatment? These are questions of clinical characterization. We can ask questions about causal inference, like does one treatment cause an outcome more than an alternative, or does a treatment cause an outcome at all? And these are questions of population level effect estimation that we think about generically. We can also ask questions like, what's the probability that I'll develop a disease? Or what's the probability that I'll experience an outcome? And these are our typical questions of patient level prediction. Now, in the abstract term, we've been talking about these types of questions for a while, but I think it's really important for us to recognize the types of questions that we're faced with in the world right now with all of its uncertainty. Which treatment do patients choose after diagnosis? Well, right now we have patients who are being inflicted with COVID-19, and we don't know what treatments should be used, and we don't even have a good handle on what treatments are being used. And we don't know why certain patients are being administered certain interventions. And we don't even have a good sense right now of how many patients have experienced the outcome. A key challenge that we have right now in this space is actually understanding the proportion of patients who get COVID-19. How many of them are going to truly have some sort of respiratory complication that may require hospitalization? How many of them are going to die? And yet these are questions that we need reliable answers on because they are driving public health policy around the world. These comparative effectiveness questions about which drug may cause an outcome more than an alternative, as Danny highlighted, there are now many treatments that are being actively experimented on patients with COVID-19 for which we do not understand the long-term safety of those products in those patients, and we don't even have rigorous information to actually know about their efficacy. But if we can provide any insights about the understanding of certain treatments that are actively being experimented on viral diseases of any sort, and use our data network to get a quick read on what's happening after these patients have used these products, we might be able to guide treatment choices for providers. And these questions about what's the probability I'm going to develop a disease and what's the probability I'm going to experience outcome. Well, as Danny said, the patient level prediction questions are directly at the heart of how we all need to work together to flatten the curve. We need to understand who are the patients who are susceptible to COVID-19. We need to understand which of those patients are going to need to go to the hospital. And we're going to need to know which of those patients are at highest risk of having adverse outcomes. And if we can use our data network to start to develop models that can be used to understand and predict which patients are at highest risk of experiencing adverse experiences, then that information could directly help with the current health crisis that we're in today. So what I've highlighted is that there are three types of problems that we generically think about in the OHDSI community. We think about clinical characterization. These are questions of descriptive statistics, direct observation. We're answering the question, what happened to them? In our environment right now, this is the question amongst patients who are COVID-19 positive, what's happening to them? What do they look like before they have the disease? What happens to them as they have the disease? And what happens to them after they contract the disease? We need these questions. We need these answers to these questions desperately as a community. We also think about patient level prediction, answering the question, what will happen to me? This is a question of inference. And as we talked about, what will happen to me? Am I going to be the patient who develops COVID-19? Am I going to be the patient who has a hospitalization due to pneumonia because of COVID-19? Am I the patient at risk of dying because of this virus? These are questions that we can answer using our patient level prediction package. And then population level effect estimation, this is when we try to get into the space of causal inference to understand what are the causal effects of medical interventions. And here there's a variety of questions that are really important. Not only are there products that are being experimented as potential treatments for patients who are COVID-19 positive, there are also treatments that are being considered as prophylactic treatments to try to ward off the virus. There's also causal inference questions about the fact that this coronavirus touches the ACE pathway, and that raises questions about whether or not drugs that are being used for other diseases, such as ACE inhibitors for hypertension, whether or not ACE inhibitors in COVID-19 are going to have some sort of adverse effect. These are questions of causal inference that we need to be able to drill down into. So what I'm going to just summarize for you are some of the priority questions that we've identified based on our review of the literature, our reaching out to stakeholders across the OHDSI community, listening to our officials and public health agencies around the world about what questions we've heard that need answers that don't seem to have reliable evidence right now. We're going to collaborate together this week on characterization questions. We've heard and seen throughout the wealth of literature that's out there, there's a good number of papers providing reports, but the vast majority of that information is still coming out of a limited set of questions being captured on case reports. Very little is coming from longitudinal data sets where we can really understand the disease course, the treatment from outpatient to inpatient care, and ultimately the outcomes. So what we aim to do is we aim to design a characterization study that's going to descriptively summarize patients with COVID-19. And we want to look at those patients and understand amongst those patients, what are their patient demographics? We will break these down by age and gender and index month. We want to look at their prior conditions to understand what diagnoses do these patients have before they develop the disease. And we'll also want to look at their prior medication use. So that we can understand what drugs are these patients on before they develop the disease, to understand both the medical composition of the patients, but also the drugs that are potentially at risk of having some untoward interaction with this disease. We're also going to characterize and descriptively summarize the treatments and the procedures that follow diagnosis of COVID-19. with the hopes that we can better understand what treatments are being considered and used and hopefully summarize those outcomes. Now, we would like to be able to summarize the COVID-19 population at large, and we're excited to have partners in Korea and other data partners who are starting to have access to COVID-19 patients. But one of the things we recognize is that there's a lot of subpopulations within the world out there of patients who have COVID-19, it's critically important for us to provide information for them. For example, we heard on the forums, there's questions about, is the experience of patients with COVID-19 different between men and women? We've heard a lot about the fact that it seems like the severity of this disease may be lesser in younger patients and much more severe in older patients. So can we summarize those subpopulations and understand the composition? There's many risk factors that have been speculated about in the discussions, including hypertension, diabetes, COPD, and heart disease. And so it would be important for us to understand, amongst the patients with those baseline characteristics, does their experience look any different? And for those populations, we'd like to be able to summarize the prevalence of those characteristics, but also summarize the incidence of outcomes, including severity complications associated with hospitalization and pneumonia and intensive care services that may be required. Now, all of these questions here require access to data about patients with COVID-19. And we recognize that most of us are right now on that uptick of the exponential curve that Danny showed earlier. So it means this data is not available and won't be available for some time in most locations. However, if we're going to interpret any data, we need to be able to put this information in the context of what we've previously have known and experienced from other viral diseases. Therefore, we think it's just as important to study COVID-19 is to actually study the same types of characteristics from prior viral seasons, and for us to use other models such as influenza to try to understand what actually is the baseline prevalence of patients reporting to outpatient or inpatient care with an array of symptoms such as fever, cough, myalgia, and shortness of breath. How often do we actually see respiratory complications like pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome? And how often are intensive treatments required, such as ventilation? By providing this background context of what we've seen over the last decade, we think we can provide a firm foundation for helping the world understand how this COVID-19 outbreak is truly different. So Chan and Ed and Danny will be leading a large group of folks to think about how we design and execute characterization studies across our network. So I want to thank Chan and Ed and Danny for their leadership here. We're also going to be collaborating on patient-level prediction questions. And many people, I think one of the great public health messages that have gotten out there is people have recognized what it means to flatten the curve. But very, very practically speaking, talking about flattening the curve is really trying to balance the fact that there's going to be an excess demand for health services that far exceeds the supply that's available, despite the courageous work of our healthcare professionals all around the world. And so the question ultimately is going to become, how do we identify which patients are at the most risk and require the specific services that are available, given that it's going to be a limited resource? It's an unfortunate situation for us to have to be in to triage healthcare, but given that that is a reality that we're in, we have an opportunity to try to do that as appropriately and ethically as possible. And so on the basis of this, we've identified 3 prediction questions that we are prioritizing that I'll walk you through. However, I want to encourage all of you that if you have other questions, you'll have an opportunity to share your questions and try to design and develop studies as well. But based on what we've heard from our colleagues in Korea, from the CDC and the FDA and the EMA, we're focused specifically on 3 questions that we've heard could potentially be useful around the world. The first prediction question that we're focused on is amongst patients who present with flu or flu-like symptoms, which of those patients are at most risk of having to be admitted to the hospital? It's important for us to understand this because this will give us a sense of the bandwidth necessary to provide services. As you all know, current recommendations from most countries, including on my side of the pond of the US CDC, is that if you are symptomatic, you should call your doctor and be able to answer a series of questions. And on the basis of those questions of self-reported symptoms, that's going to determine whether or not you should have self-care or whether you should go seek professional services. And yet the question that most patients are going to be worried about is, if I'm symptomatic, shouldn't I just rush to the doctor right away? If we could provide context and information for this, we think that that would be quite useful. A second question that we'd like to focus on is, amongst patients who go to an outpatient visit with flu or flu-like symptoms, who are not admitted to the hospital today or tomorrow, which of those patients actually progress with respiratory complications to the point that they are hospitalized later? We think this is quite important because guidelines are suggesting that patients that are only symptomatic should likely stay home unless they are in specific risk factor categories. But what we know is that many patients are quite concerned, and even after receiving doctor's advice that they should stay home and that they should not incur additional risk by leaving their house, and they should certainly not burden the healthcare system by having unnecessary hospitalization, we know that still patients are worried, and some of those patients are showing up at the hospital due to their mild symptoms. And so we think developing a prediction model that'll actually explain that actually the doctor's advice is generally right, and that there's only a very small fraction of patients who are at the truly high risk that you should think about going against your doctor's advice. Here, what we're talking about is, can we predict who's going to be safe? And we think that our data could be quite useful for us to try to develop a model to assure the public of this. A third question that we'd like to focus on is, amongst patients who are admitted to the hospital with pneumonia, which of those patients are going to experience more severe disease that would require intensive care services or potentially result in mortality? This is critically important as our hospitals around the world are becoming facing challenging decisions about who should be admitted and what services to provide to which patients. And so if we had a good sense of how we could identify which patients are most likely to have adverse consequences during their hospital stay, that might help to triage and accelerate the appropriate treatment for patients. Peter, Jenna, and Ross will be leading this group, and we're excited to see so many people are interested in applying machine learning algorithms in training and externally validating models around the world to support this effort. We've also identified a series of population level estimation questions to support and provide context around products that are actively being considered and experimented on for use in COVID-19. One of the products that's getting the most active interest right now is hydroxychloroquine. This is a drug that's actually a DMARD indicated for rheumatoid arthritis, originally developed as an anti-malarial agent. And it is actively being investigated as a potential prophylactic and treatment for COVID-19. So we intend to conduct a series of self-controlled case series analysis and comparative cohort analysis comparing to other conventional DMARDs to try to understand if we can learn and develop any insights about the general safety profile of these products, but also whether we can understand whether we can get any hints at differential incidence of viral disease onset and viral complications. Recently, there's interest in the potential concomitant exposure to hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. And so we are also going to try to explore whether or not we can understand if there's a differential safety profile there. Now, we have a decade of experience using hydroxychloroquine in our data network, and we can actually try to use this data to look at legacy, to study the safety profile of these products, and also to try to understand whether or not there's any insights we can gain by applying our statistical methods to other viral models, including influenza. And so we will be attempting that during this week, but we will also be designing a study package that will be able to be executed on any data set that contains COVID-19 patients as soon as that data becomes available. And while we might not have sufficient data to produce a robust causal inference effect estimate today, what we're going to do is produce a foundation that's going to allow us to produce a reliable estimate as soon as that data becomes available and start to provide initial readout from whatever data we have available. And so I'm excited to see what progress we can make given the tremendous uncertainty here. Danny and Martijn are going to be leading the team in this charge. We also want to explore IL-6 and JAK inhibitors. There are many biologic DMARDs for rheumatoid arthritis that have immunosuppressive effects, and it has been speculated that immunosuppression may be an effective strategy for patients who are COVID-19 positive, particularly those whose immune systems overreact to the stimulus and cause them to have severe respiratory compromise. So the thought is that potentially biologic therapies may be effective. Several of them are actively being explored in clinical trials right now. Our goal is to study those RA biologic products through self-controlled case series and comparative cohort studies to understand the safety profile and understand whether or not we can see any differential effects on viral disease onset and complications. And as with all of these questions, we hope to see if there's any insights we can learn from using influenza as an alternative viral model. But probably more importantly is we're setting the foundation of how we will conduct this study on COVID-19 data as soon as it becomes available. Danny and his team will be leading this effort. Protease inhibitors for HIV are actively being considered as potential prophylaxis treatment for COVID-19 because of their antiviral properties. And in fact, based on the literature review that John Duke and Anna Scharfman and the team conducted for us, we actually saw that these two drugs, lopinavir and ritonavir, are the two drugs that actually have the most ongoing clinical trials of any experimental therapy. So it's really important that we understand the effects of these products as best as we can. And so we will be using these products to conduct a series of self-controlled case series and comparative cohort studies, where we'll be comparing protease inhibitors to integrase inhibitors and NNRTIs to study the safety, long-term safety profile, and to understand whether or not these products targeting HIV have any differential effect on other viruses. There are also protease inhibitors that are currently indicated for hepatitis C. And some of these are actively being investigated as potential treatments for COVID-19. And so as a similar path, we will look to design population level effect estimation studies to study the safety of these products and to explore the differential impact on viral disease, comparing these protease inhibitors to peg interferon and ribavirin as comparators. Talita and Albert will be leading this charge. And last but certainly not least, there is a lot of concern right now about the potential use of ACE inhibitors. As many of you know, and you've probably seen from our prior OHDSI work, hypertension being one of the most prevalent comorbid conditions around, and being a potential risk factor associated with COVID-19, it's important for us to understand that well. And ACE inhibitors is the most prevalent class of drugs being used for hypertension. And there's a concern because of the fact that the ACE2 pathway is something that is an entry point for COVID-19, and that can be upregulated by ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. We do not know right now whether or not ACE inhibitors or ARBs increase the risk of developing COVID-19 or increase the risk of severity due to the disease. Yet, because of this biologic plausibility, there's tremendous concern. And this concern has actually resulted in many professional societies issuing various statements and recommendations about treatment, largely recognizing the complete absence of evidence to support these questions. So in our Study-A-Thon and moving forward, we're going to try to compare ACE inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers to other antihypertensive drugs, such as calcium channel blockers and thiazide diuretics, to try to evaluate two fundamental questions. There's a question of susceptibility. Amongst new users of these drugs, which patients are at risk of developing COVID-19? And then there's a second question around severity. Amongst patients who are COVID-19 positive, who are already taking these hypertensive drugs, what is the differential risk of going on to have some sort of viral complication? Chan, Mark, and Danny are going to be leading the effort to try to help us provide some reliable real-world evidence to support this challenging question. Now, what I've just highlighted for you is a series of characterization, prediction, and estimation questions. And we've prioritized these questions the best we could based on the feedback that we've heard from across our community and based on the input from everybody together. But we want to highlight that this is not just a series of questions that we're pushing down on everybody else. Rather, this is an opportunity for us to prioritize the questions we've heard from the community and yet provide a forum for others to raise questions that they want. And as you start to engage in this study-a-thon, you're going to have the opportunity to raise your own questions and to form your own collaborations with others to ask questions if you have other priority questions that you want to raise. But whether you're doing a characterization question or a prediction question or an estimation question, we're going to need a series of competencies coming together to work on this problem. We're going to need to conduct literature reviews and develop protocols that specifies exactly what we're going to do. We're going to need to develop phenotypes and evaluate them across our data network to make sure we're defining our populations correctly. We're going to need to develop analysis packages so that we can have code that works across the data community against the OMOP Common Data Model. We're going to need data partners to execute those packages, running the code against their data and generating aggregate summary statistics that contain no patient-level data and sharing those aggregate statistics back centrally so that we can disseminate those results. And then we need a team of clinical experts to review those results, decide what we've learned, and ultimately, together, we will disseminate this evidence to all the folks that are going to use it. Now, what I'm showing you here is a tracker of how we're going to be monitoring our progress this week. And you can see we've got a lot of work to be done. For every one of these studies, we need to work through all of these steps. And it's why we need all 300 of you together working with us to make progress on these, to try to get these things to be from to be done to be completed. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who's going to tell you how we're going to actually do that.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Yeah, so as you can understand, this is quite a challenge, how we're going to organize ourselves with so many people. We've done a couple of study-a-thons before, which were very interesting, I would say, but those were all at a location. So we brought together like 30 to 40 people with different competences on a specific topic. And we worked together very intensively for a full week. So those interactions are very easy because you can talk to each other, you can see each other. And we were thinking, how can we do that now in this time of crisis where we cannot meet each other? So we have installed a Teams environment. And you can go to the next slide, Patrick. Thank you. So a collaboration environment called Teams. And all people that have signed up for the study-a-thon should have received instructions on how to get into the Teams environment. I can recommend also to have a look at your spam folder. You may have missed it because of that. And there is a web application that you can use, but we highly recommend to use the desktop application, which is just nicer. It's more interactive as well. And there is a nice mobile app. So if you're really engaged, you can use the mobile app as well. If you have problems with getting into Teams, we've set up a support email address, odyssey-support@mi-erasmusmc.nl. So please use that. It's not a huge team of 100 people waiting for your questions, but we will do our best to help you out. And next one, Patrick. Thank you. So the Teams environment looks like this, and I'm gonna quickly run you through the interface so you know where to find things. Next one. So on the left, you have kind of menu bar, and you see a couple of icons there. The top one is called Activity. That's actually quite handy because that shows messages that have been posted in the channels that you have been involved in, so you can track whether there are updates, but also if somebody mentions you, you have a symbol for that to get attention from a certain person. There's also chat functionality. That's mainly for a one-to-one or one-to-many chats. It's quite nice. So if you are working together with a team, you can set up a chat box within your team. Next slide. So the most important thing, I think, is this long list of channels. So these channels are like the competencies that Patrick showed in his earlier slide, and it has sections for the different studies, for example, a study on characterization or prediction. And these will be the main communication channels within those teams. Next slide. So on the top, there is a search bar, which is quite helpful. So there you can type in your search question, and it will search through all the posts, and that's nice if you're get lost, because I can imagine there will be many posts from all of you in there. It also allows you to find certain people. So if you type in my name and then click on that button on the left, you can start a chat with that person, which is also quite useful, I would say. Next one. That's the top bar of the specific channel. So what you see here is the general channel, but I've selected on the top the book of OHDSI. So what's nice is that the book is now integrated in the Teams environment, so you can just scroll through the book. And per channel, there may be different menu items there, including, of course, the post, which is just a long list of questions that people are asking and where you can participate in. Next one. So on that, that's the content area. So there will be the content depending on what you click on the top. It could be like the Twitter channel from OHDSI, but also if you click on the left in one of the channels, you will see that that list of questions. Next. What's important to have a kind of some rules, at least in the channels, to not have it completely cluttered. So one important thing to note is that there are two options to post something in a channel. The first one is to start a new conversation. So that's what you see on the left. That's if you want to discuss something new. If you want to reply to a certain message, use the reply function on that message. And the reason for that is that it will be nicely, everything stays nicely together. And also, each time somebody replies to a question, it moves to the bottom of the list. So if you made a reply that's not inside the conversation, the order will get lost. So keep that in mind. Next one. Some rules. We would recommend not to just say small things like hello or good morning, because that will create a very long list of items in the post. Let's have very good conversations about topics that we want to discuss. Also, we like you not to reply to agenda invites, because it might be that people have notifications on and will get that in their email box. Also, many of you who already are in Teams introduce themselves, and that's great, and we really like everybody to do that. But please do that in that specific channel and not in the general channel. Meeting invites, like this one actually, will be posted in the Teams environment, and if it's something that's related to a specific channel, it will be in that channel, and if it's for the whole community, it will be in the general channel. So have a look at that, and if you go to the next slide, Patrick. So if you need support and you probably will have questions, please use the support channel for that. We have people that will help in case you have questions. And the nice thing of this is that if somebody else already asked the same questions, you can actually see it there. So it would lower the pressure on our team as well. Next one. So this was actually quite a challenge. We were wondering how we're going to do this. So there are so many time zones. So we struggled quite a bit of making this list. And there's one other challenge is that we switch our time in Europe, also in the middle of or at the end of the meeting. But we figured it out. So there's a schedule. As you see here, there is, we're at the kickoff now, but there will be kickoff meetings of some of the sub-teams that will follow after this meeting. So the characterization sub-team will start, and then the others will follow. So the idea of these meetings is not that the full group will join that. Of course, you're all welcome, but it's mainly for that specific team that you signed up for. So otherwise, if you want to follow it later, it will also be recorded. So you're aware of that. The other things is that we will have daily updates in this kind of live environment that you're in now. So there will be 3 of those each day, and this is actually the first one of this day. And the idea for this is really to update people quickly. So it will be short live events where Patrick and Dani will update you all on the progress that's been made within the community. Next one. So we will be using, as Patrick said, this tracker, and in those update calls, they will go through this and show where everybody is. But what we of course like to end up in the end of the meeting, next one, is that everything turns green. So this is really challenging. So we have 4 days. We have a lot of people, but we will have many parallel interactions, and it will be a challenge to get there. But I'm quite positive that we have a very, very good team that can support this, and with all of your contributions, I think we can get pretty far with this. Of course, this is not the end, so we will continue, but it would be fantastic if we have as much green cells at the end of this Excel sheet, at the end of the Study-A-Thon on Sunday. Now, we're not doing this alone, so on the next slide you see that there's many people from many different time zones, which I think is really fantastic that we are literally working together with the whole world. All the different time zones are represented, and I think that's fantastic. So we can actually work 24 hours a day, and that's a nice thing, I would say. In the next slide, you see also that there's a nice spread on across the different studies. So people could sign up to that form. Not everybody did that, so 160 out of the 300 people filled in the form. So you may have to decide still where you want to participate in, but you can do that when you're in the team site. But it's a nice distribution, I think, and it's good to see that. On the next one, we also see that we have a nice spread of competences, and I think this is the most exciting thing about collaborating in OHDSI, is that we have so many different competences and so many good people for all of this. And this is also shown in this slide, where all the people that sign up together can realize that challenging goal that we have for all these different studies in those 4 days. So I'm very excited about that. And also we have data. And so there are quite a lot of databases that are participating, which I think is really fantastic. And also almost on a daily basis, we are contacted by other data sources that like to participate. And some of them may not even be on OMOP yet, but they now want to expedite that and say, can we please get on OMOP as quickly as possible and participate in the OHDSI network? And I think that's really exciting. Also from Europe, where we have the European Health Data and Evidence Network project that I'm coordinating together with Nigel Hughes. It's very exciting to see how many data sources are signing up for that. And imagine if we would have coverage of all the European countries and would be able to answer some of these questions that we have that Patrick laid out. Next slide. So that is really important thing to realize, that this is the start of a journey, and it's going to be a long journey, I would think. So there's a lot more research foreseen after that list that Patrick showed, and that also needs your input. So we really hope that all the people that are participating will think about other types of studies that we can do. It, of course, is not going to be possible to realize that all in these 4 days. But having a long list of questions and having a community work on that, I think is really fantastic. We want to be prepared for the COVID data that's coming, and I think we already have a lot of pipelines ready to go, but now we need to define the studies and make them ready whenever we got the data. So we hope that you will also, of course, stay engaged after this 4 days and collaborate with us. On the next slide, I also like to thank you for being here. And I've been part of the team that started this, and I've been working extremely hard to get this up and running. And I really hope that it's going to be a great success. The data partners and of course your participation is really needed. Then I think we are at the end of the presentations. There is an option to ask questions, and some of you may have been typing questions like this guy, or you may have been writing code already to help us. That would even be better. But if there are any questions, we can take them now. Also realize that in the Teams environment, we can answer many questions, of course, once you're in there. I'm going to stop there. I'm not sure, Patrick or Danny, have you seen any questions that you like to respond to?
So people can post their questions. We're seeing them and we'll answer them. So I'll just take one here. So there's a question about these competencies and how do you sign up? So you are welcome and encouraged to follow all of the channels on the Teams. However, just in terms of prioritizing your own focus, we would just ask that if you didn't get an email from me in the last day, or I guess what it was, a few hours ago, assigning you to your preference, then please get on the Teams and just choose one of the competencies or studies that you really want to focus on, and just stay focused on that channel and see how you can help. Every channel has a team of leads who are going to be helping to delegate out the tasks, and so join those conversations asynchronously through the chat function, and then also there will be some meetings that may pop up and you can join those. So we encourage you to do that and join whatever area you're interested in. Somebody
take a question, Patrick, if you want.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Danny.
There's a question from Chen on which sources with COVID-19 patient-level data are currently available to the community. There are some colleagues from South Korea who have done an amazing job and have been mapping data from hospitals and claims data from South Korea, and they will be using that data hopefully throughout the study-a-thon. And we are also working very hard with partners from different places around the world to see, how we can get other data on COVID-19 infectees, especially from Europe and the US, I guess. And that's, as we said, one of the advantages of the work we'll be doing here is that everything we prepare can be run in data as it comes very quickly.
I think it's important also to reinforce for those who are newer to the OHDSI community. So we work as a distributed data network where everybody is volunteering to execute analysis packages and then share back aggregate results. And so what that means is what we're going to be doing as a team is designing study packages that can run anywhere. And then hopefully we'll be able to get sites who will be willing to run those. So think of the work that we're doing this 4 days isn't just about can we get access to data today, but it's really can we create the foundation to prepare an analysis that can be run both today and tomorrow as more data accumulates.
Just to point out, the Columbia data is up to date, so any cases coming in will be in there.
Great, thanks, George. There's a comment about these slides that we just presented, and are they going to be available? So yes, we will post them in the Teams under General, and they'll say kickoff slides, and so we'll post those as soon as we get off of this call and make them available to you.
Yeah, and I see one person asking how to get in the team site. So please send an email to OHDSI-support@mi-erasmusmc.nl if you have questions, and we can pick that up. I think this is it. I'd like to thank everyone for their attention. And we'll talk to you very soon in one of the other TCs and definitely on the forums and channels in the Teams environment. So thank you very much, and thanks everyone for presenting.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.